I think that 60% of the population is oblivious as to what's coming. And majority of them are placing their bet that this is yet another creative destruction, industrial revolution version. So 60% of the people, I think, are not aware of the magnitude and shortening timeline where this is going to actually hit them.
The future of work is under attack. Advanced AI and robotics are moving in fast, and the rules of the economy will never be the same. In this episode of Mindblowers, I sit down with former Deloitte executive Dalibor Petrovic to reveal our strategies for coping with the coming post-labor world and how you can start preparing today. Welcome to the Mindblowers Podcast. So today we're going to discuss post-labor economics again, but more about what you can do as an individual to prepare yourself for what is coming. And in the studio today, we can welcome Dalibor back. Great to see you.
Lovely to see you. Pleasure to be back.
Thank you. So I think what a lot of people are talking or are thinking about these days are, yes, I kind of buy into the idea that we'll see automation. I guess I also buy into the idea that we'll see some form of abundance. But what should I do actively? Should I fight to hold on to my job as long as possible and save and invest? Should I try to create something that has more longevity in terms of not being automated away? Or what should I do basically? Should I cut all my costs so I'm used to living on a stone? What should be the strategy?
Yeah. So good question. Very important question, very timely question. And I have to start by saying I actually don't know all the answers. I can only react to what I see is unfolding because the situation is so unique that we find ourselves in. In every previous industrial revolution, we went through the process of creative destruction. And the process of creative destruction essentially means that technology advancement destroyed previous industries and re-emerged new industries that provided, supplemental new kinds of work, new kinds of jobs. So there was disruption, there were big losers and winners, but ultimately everyone settled into the new reality and found new jobs, right? This time, I fear this could be actually different, that displacement of our intelligence and dexterity and ultimately our emotional and conceptual value that we bring as humans will now be supplemented by entities that are better, faster, cheaper, and safer. And that in this industrial revolution, creative destruction is not going to result in emergence of new jobs for everybody.
I think that is a good point. The question is whether a new type of job or labor will emerge. What I'm personally thinking is that there would be quite a lot of knowledge workers earning, let's say, $100,000 a year that could quite easily be replaced by AI.
Yeah.
And then maybe what they can offer is a nice smile at the local cafe, for example.
Yeah.
Let's say they're extrovert and they're charming. That might be a great thing they could do.
Yeah.
But the value that they could be paid for this would be $20,000 a year, for example.
Correct.
Other people might go into content creation like we are doing right now, and some people might love that, and that might be also $20,000 instead of, a couple of $100,000 that these knowledge workers are used to. So do you think there will be this new class of low-wage jobs that people can migrate to?
Yeah, I think that what you're describing, I think, is most likely scenario. That traditionally, historically, we have been used to the concept of full-time employment. You early in your development, early in your life, you pick a stream of your professional career orientation. You finish education, you get a first job, second job, third job, but effectively you are a lifer. You work full-time throughout your life and then you retire and that's it. I think that we are moving into a completely different equation where this concept is no longer going to hold true for most people. We have actually gone through a version of this transition already, and that's the version of people no longer stay with the same employer for their whole career, but people have been changing jobs frequently, right? Every 3 to 4 years, new employer, new role, and so on and so forth. But still, the basic concept remained. Those were all full-time employees, and also they were all operated within similar industries. You can change jobs, but you're staying within the same kind of industry. What's going to happen when that is no longer available as an option? So I think that's what's going to happen is that people are going to start thinking about securing multiple sources of fractional income. And in an effect, people are going to need to become solopreneurs individually, solopreneurs. And what that would mean is that it's a combination of sources of income that everyone needs to orchestrate for them. And those combinations of sources of income will still have to rely on some form of residual wages. So you're exchanging your labor for money, but increasingly it will have to be supplemented by other non-traditional sources of income and activity that might be foreign for you now. A good example is what you described. Like a knowledge worker who is making $100,000 no longer is employed as a knowledge worker. They still need to bring $100,000 in order to sustain their life. And maybe partly they can tone it down. So they might no longer need 100,000. They might need 80,000. And that might need 80,000 because of the natural tendency of technology to drive down prices of goods and services. There could be an element of self-imposed control and restraint on spending too, but nevertheless, you have to gain income in order to just even if you're replacing $100,000 lifestyle with a $60,000 lifestyle, you have to find a way to get those $60,000. So I think that people need to start thinking of themselves as solopreneurs, a version of entrepreneurship where personal accountability to orchestrate your financial well-being is going to become much more elastic. The challenge is that many people actually are going to successfully navigate this, and they might feel actually that this is a liberating moment for them. Those are the people who are, jumping ahead of the wagon. People like you who have chosen to be in front of this train. But majority of people are going to find themselves in a very uncomfortable situation because they have never been asked to do anything like this. People have been conditioned to expect full-time employment, and even if that full-time employment ends with one employer, they go to the next employer, right? So now, what would be the right strategies? I think that we should divide this into a short-term, mid-term, and long-term, right? In the short term, I believe that the right strategy for majority, I'm talking about majority of the population, and majority of the population are not entrepreneurs. That's a fact, right? Majority of people do not enjoy disruption and change. Majority of people prefer low-risk stability, right? So I think that for those people who are in that majority, the short-term strategy has to be twofold. One is figuring out how do you continue increasing your current value to your current employer by understanding and leveraging the potential of technology around you or technology within your organization. So if you want to protect yourself in the short term from being at risk of losing your job, my advice would be learn technology, artificial intelligence systems, agents, and so on, and spend the time to understand it and learn it, and learn how to introduce it so that it can propel your productivity and effectiveness at work, so that you become less replaceable than someone else who is not doing that. The good news is that support and help to achieve this is free and available everywhere. So with some discipline, focus, and concerted efforts, most people should be able to learn and self-educate on how to leverage this available technology to help them propel their productivity and effectiveness. Also take advantage of every offer that your organization might have on e-learning, accreditation, certification. Make sure that you are applying yourself. It is a short-term strategy to increase your personal productivity at work. Now, we've been listening to, tech billionaires talk about, in the future, don't worry, one software engineer can now be as productive as 50. Yes, that's true, assuming that there is enough customers to buy the output of 50 engineers, right? Today, they have one engineer producing output because that's the demand out there, and you're balancing supply and demand. If suddenly one engineer can have the output of 50 engineers, that has to be matched with the equivalent demand out there. So where I'm going with this is that, yes, there is going to be an amplification of potential of every individual, but I don't think it is going to be at such scale that everybody is going to be able to multiply themselves multiple times and secure their longevity at work that way, because the demand side is missing. So a more likely scenario is if you have a team of 10 engineers that now produce the output of 10 engineers, if that team can now produce the output of 100 engineers, and there is no demand for such an output, you're going to end up with 5 engineers or 3. Still have you still have a problem with those remaining 7 who now might be facing job loss. So to me, as a short-term strategy number 1, make sure that you are as productive by leaning in and understanding how to actually leverage technology that's available, and make it visible to position yourself as the most valuable player in the team, while at the same time actively thinking and acting to gradually decouple yourself from reliance on one single source of income, which is the wage.
Yeah, so one way this could play out is, of course, that some people would become extremely valuable because they would be able to orchestrate all of this. So in theory, taking the jobs of 100 people. And then you would probably see a huge inequality in terms of the wages, right? Some people would have a very hard time adding value anywhere, and some would add a lot of value. So the typical way Europe or most of Europe would react to this is, okay, let's intervene. Let's go from 50% tax to 80 to 90% tax, and then distribute. The challenge is, of course, that would delay the road to abundance.
Yes.
Also, they would probably tax profits very much. Most likely, China and the US would not do this, right? They would probably put immense pressure on the individual to find ways to sustain themselves.
Yes.
I'm thinking. How do you see this playing out?
So I think that we have two competing philosophies that are playing out in the world globally right now with the attempts to solve for this. One is a centralized governance, centralized decision making, which is what China is pursuing. And the other version is what the United States is pursuing, which is continuation of essentially a liberal democracy operating in a free market economy. Yes, the United States version is going to put the emphasis on an individual to orchestrate their well-being with some support from the government, while I think China is taking the different route. Europe, I think, finds itself in a very precarious situation where good intentions and idealistic desires are actually holding it back. It's holding back its development. It's holding back its, as a matter of fact, if anything, it has actually been reversing its industrialization. It has been shutting down energy production over the last 10, 15 years. And like all of that, I can intellectually justify by, idealistic views around environment and climate change and so on and so forth. But net result is that in this ultimate race, I think Europe has chosen to self-exclude effectively. And I'm not sure if Europe will be able to actually catch up. It's a serious, I think, challenge that's facing Europe, and I think that the shift in direction is urgently needed, quite frankly, because the direction that this is on is not going to be competitive with either China or United States, or maybe even if we restate it, not China and Russia together. We are no longer talking about, I think, China as an entity. We ought to start thinking about Eurasia as an emerging entity, which is shifting the balance from Western Europe as the leader on that mega continent to Eurasian powers that are now going to be leading on that mega continent.
Let's shift back to the individual, right? So one thing I hear you say is it will be extremely important to be flexible and ready to adapt as an individual.
Yes. Correct. So as I mentioned, short-term strategy is to make yourself as invaluable to your organization as you can by leaning into understand the promise of technology and applicability to your current job, while at the same time you are doing deep exploration of what is actually your ikigai, what is your life's purpose, and organizing and thinking about how to actually gradually shift from secure source of income that you now have, which will end. The question is just how many years from ending, and how do you actually now buffer yourself by lighting up other sources of income, ideally those sources of income aligned to your personal ikigai, your personal purpose in life. And for those who might not be familiar with ikigai, I would warmly recommend that everybody spend some time to understand that framework. It's a Japanese model, very simple, to help individuals sort of understand their purpose in life. And that to me is going to be a very important shift. So now, what are those other potential sources of income? Still wages, still work, but not your current employment. Work that you can monetize, ideally, your unique value proposition, your unique knowledge, your unique experience, your unique interests, your unique hobbies, and thinking of ways to convert your interests into source of supplementary income. You are doing this, Daniel, by running a YouTube channel and being present in social media. This is the manifestation, I am going to assume, of your personality and style and interest and passions, right? That is a supplementary income. You mentioned other sources of income by being a pleasant, smiling greeter at a local coffee shop. I think what is going to happen is that on this path to abundance, a side benefit is going to be increasing collaboration as a successful survival strategy for people. So I think that, if anything, we are going to see a much richer human-to-human connections and interactions at the local level. So people are going to get re-engaged in their local communities, compelled to contribute, with potentially turning that contribution into additional source of income. Then people need to start thinking about amplifying their property ownership such that they are drawing portion of their income from those property rights. And whether those are rentals or dividends, that has to factor in. And, the old age advice is, take 15% of every single check and invest it. It has to hold true, and people need to be doing that and teaching children to do that from the very, very beginning, right? The fourth element is to be mindful as to where you spend your money. And I'll give you an example of this. Co-op banks, for example, are by definition owned by those who have the accounts in those co-op banks, right? So there is an element of ownership that you can achieve just simply through your choice of your economic activity, right? And I believe that very soon we are going to see organizations that are emerging who are rewarding your customer loyalty by offering you fractional ownership of their corporation. And that, like, if you are an we are all economic, we have economic agency, right? And our economic agency is expressed by how and where we spend our money. I believe we are coming to a phase now where organizations will compete for the customer by perhaps introducing and offering to them some element of fractional ownership, which ultimately over time ought to become material component, an element of your material element of your total, source portfolio of income, if you wish, a portfolio of income.
Do you think?
Sorry, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Do you think maybe our attention will move from being something where we are offered products free till we actually paid for it? So an example would be Facebook, right? Facebook is free, but we're paying with our attention. Could you imagine us being paid to watch some movies, for example, some older movies with a lot of advertising in it, or flicking through a social media feed, simply because the attention is worth more than the product being consumed?
That's an interesting proposition, actually. So, I can absolutely see that happen, but not at scale that would result in that being a meaningful element of average person's portfolio of income. But definitely for a subsegment of population, yes, I can see that occurring. But I don't think it's going to be material in the portfolio of income of the broader population. The other problem that we are facing, so this is the other problem that is being faced, by the way, is as we are facing significant reduction of need for human labor and job loss, we have running a risk of demand for goods and services also dropping down, right?
Yes.
So this is where I think the model of I'm going to be paying you to spend time watching ads will break down. I think that ads are there to compel people to go and spend the money. If people, don't have the money to spending money on ads is kind of pointless, right?
Yeah.
So to me, that's going to be the challenge with that particular aspect. But I think that the aspect that will be present and available is some form of a government intervention. The question that I am now thinking of is, at which point do we see that government intervention, and what kind of intervention is it going to be? So if you look at history, governments actually do intervene in the moments of crisis. That has happened in the last economic crisis in 2008. That has happened throughout COVID, obviously. That has happened during the depression of 1920s, right? But the situation needs to be really bad before government chooses to intervene like that. I think that, statistically, I think the unemployment, when unemployment reaches 15%, 18%, in that sort of range, then I think we can expect government intervention. And I think that government intervention is going to be required in that transition period, for sure, if not ongoingly, to secure essentially preservation of the peace and cohesion of our society, right? So to me, that's how I think we should all be thinking about this. We have to be moving from the concept of single source of income through wages into the concept of portfolio of income, some of it coming from wages still, and that wage component might be reduced to a 2-day work week, let's say, or 1-day work week, supplemented by another maybe source of wages from a completely different activity that might be supplementing another, 1/5 of your wages, of your income needs, supplemented by perhaps transfer from government that is supplementing another 1/5 of your income wages. So you have 1, 2, 3, and now the other 2 fifths, or let's say another 40%, we have to figure out how do we light up various flavors of property ownership. And that property ownership will have to be a combination of what you have saved, what you may have inherited, but also how does your economic activity, day-to-day activity, convert into long-term co-ownership, right? Co-ownership. And that could be manifested through, some form of sovereign wealth fund or some form of collectively owned private asset, like a co-op, for example. Co-op.
And I guess the big challenge here is normally governments have said, if we're going to help you, if you're going to support you, you have to prove that you don't have any investment income. Otherwise, you can use all of that first. Also, if you start getting income, an income stream from a job, we will also remove the benefit, right?
Yeah.
And I think that will be a big hurdle, right? To think differently and say, well, this needs to be a small permanent income stream. Maybe it should be regulated based on how much other income you have, but maybe it shouldn't disappear unless your other incomes are very high.
So I think that's, to me, if we talk about universal basic income, I think it has to be universal, and that means that everyone should get exactly the same amount. Otherwise, it's not universal basic income, it's welfare. And that's not what we are talking about here. So I think that, waiting for people to spend what they've saved before lighting up universal basic income is a recipe for a disaster. Everybody's going to end up in poverty, right? And everybody might end up relying on universal basic income as they all spend what they've accumulated over decades of work. So to me, this concept of, you have property, you happen to have two rental properties and therefore you don't qualify for universal basic income, you still lose your job, and you still eventually, you're going down, and eventually from two properties you have to sell one, and now you extended your livelihood by another few years from sale of your first rental property, and then 3 years from now you have to sell your second rental property, and 5 years from now you're poor. So I think this would be a very dangerous path to go down. In my assessment, and by the way, I'm not an economist. I did spend multiple decades in the world's largest professional services firm, so I was directly exposed to some of the world's top economists and accountants and thinkers. But nevertheless, I have a point of view, but I'm not an expert. My point of view is, if we're going to do universal basic income, it ought to be the same amount for everyone, regardless of their balance sheet, and it ought to be sufficient to address the bottom portion of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That should be the two guiding principles. The bottom portion of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs deals with basic sustenance. So enough money to feed yourself, enough money to ensure basic shelter, right? And then the rest has to be available for people to organize and orchestrate themselves. By the way, it's no different today. The difference is that today you individually orchestrate yourself by going to get a full-time job for a one employer, most likely. In tomorrow's world, that dealing with yourself might imply you acting as a solopreneur and figuring out how do you organize, 5, 10, 12 concurrent sources of income that ultimately add up to what you need on top of that basic income. And that, I think we have to preserve an open market economy, the free exchange of ideas to actually stimulate that. And that's how I think we're going to, that is how I think we actually overcome this transition phase of maybe next 10 years, when we ultimately land at a state of true age of abundance, or super abundance.
But it's interesting when you think about how different countries deal with this. So, as far as I understand, in the US, I mean, if you're unemployed, you maybe have 6 months of kind of some form of government support outside of what you might get from the company laying you off. But then after that, you're pretty much on your own. You might get some food stamps and so on, but you're basically on the street, right? If you don't have savings. So the European model, at least in many of the Scandinavian countries and Germany, it's more like we'll give you a basic level of income, but that would be not only enough for shelter and food, but also enough to go to the movies from time to time. And, it's kind of it's almost defined as a human right that you can have a little bit extra on birthdays and Christmases and so on, that the minimum cannot go below this. So I'm seeing the transition of that model being even more difficult, because you will have to tell people that what we can give you is a bare minimum, because there are now more people in need than before.
Yeah. So in the age of scarcity, that proposition holds true. So yes, you're right. But as we are entering the age of abundance, that proposition might actually not necessarily hold true. And so what I mean by that is, if we collectively play this out properly and manage this transition in an orderly and organized fashion, with everyone understanding what's going on and its impact that it'll have to themselves and their community and the region, state, province, and the nation, I think we can manage this transition such that it is not as painful as otherwise would be, to derive to the state of that superabundance, where not only would everyone be able to go to the movies, but everybody will be able to go and secure their full livelihoods, with a fraction of income they currently need. So, if anything, I think that the path to that prosperity is to accelerate it, to bring it forward, so that the pain of transition is compressed. So to me, the answer is more automation and more autonomy faster, so that we can achieve that end state of abundance. It's almost like let's tear the Band-Aid and not let this unfold in a slow, painful 2-decade struggle, because we might not be able to keep it at peace. Let's compress this and make sure that we get to that stage of abundance as soon as we can possibly make it. This is why I am saying I can understand the action of United States building the Fortress America, investing in energy independence, investing in reindustrialization, investing in resource independence, because I believe they fundamentally understand that has to be in place in order to achieve the stage of abundance, in order to satisfy the needs of its population, right? So to me, that's what I think is occurring. And similar thing is happening in China. And where I see Europe is regulating in the middle.
Yeah.
But Europe is regulating. It's regulating itself into a significant, I think, risk of being completely non-competitive and lagging behind, and not being able to actually achieve that stage of abundance for its population. And to me, this is alarming to watch, right? It's alarming to watch. And the reactions of politicians in Europe, it seems to be, let's prepare for war. That's what the reaction is, as opposed to let's reindustrial our energy and manufacture. Let's close our economic loop so that we can have prosperity for our population. And I think that's playing out right now. And well, it remains to be seen how this actually ultimately unfolds. But I think that sort of the direction that I can see European politicians are leading is not really heading towards this stage of abundance. And I think both the United States and China are heading in that direction.
I can imagine quite a number of listeners would think, I would like to vote for somebody who would reject this development, because I want to reject the idea of me losing my routine job.
Yeah.
I have a nice lifestyle. I don't want to change. I don't want to become flexible. I don't want to become a YouTuber. I certainly don't want to smile at people in the cafe.
Yes, I can completely understand that and sentiment. I can completely understand the sentiment. I can fully empathize with that sentiment. Here is what I would say is the reality. We live in the open market economy. And because of the world of scarcity that we all live in, competition and conflict is the strategy for survival. So let's say conflict is a strategy for survival. A milder version of that is competition, but competition is a method to survive, both personally and as a corporation, as a business, right? So businesses are engaged in an open market where competition is the game, and you outcompete your competitor by delivering product or service that is higher quality, faster, better, cheaper, safer. That's the mechanism in which we currently live. The optimum number of employees for any company, is 0. That's the optimal number. You only employ someone to project to project yourself, because you have reached the physical limit of what you can contribute as an individual. So the economic the reality forces you to hire another employee and another employee. And, if your business is successful, you end up with an army of 250,000 employees. But the optimum number is 0. And every company which exists out there in a competitive environment is going to look at ways to maintain its relevance and its competitiveness. So to me, that force, that there, is the basic force that runs our society, is the force that is driving this reduction of a need for human labor. And that is irreversible. It is irreversible simply because we live in a connected world. And even if a particular nation chose to isolate itself completely and, eliminate technological advancements, they do not live in a vacuum. They live in a context of an interconnected world. So, to me, this train has left the station, or should I say, we have passed the horizon.
Yeah, I agree with that.
We have passed the event horizon already.
I agree, but I guess one thought experiment would be, say, somebody who lives in Europe, say, okay, I like this system. Why don't the European Union slow down? And then we impose huge tariffs on the US and China so they can become hyper effective, but we just don't want to buy their stuff. We'll only buy our own stuff, maybe outside of, let's say energy. And then we can continue in this unautomated world with high employment.
Yeah. I think that, I'm not sure it could that be organized at this point in time, because I think that for that to work, you have to have independence in energy first and foremost. Then you have to have access to all resources, raw materials, right? You have to have, what you are describing effectively is the concept of a full closed loop economy, right?
Yes.
And you can say we're going to isolate ourselves from everybody, and we are going to ensure that we have a closed loop economy within ourselves. But in order to do that, you have to have energy that fuels closed loop supply chain and closed loop from raw materials to final product. From what I can tell, Europe has chosen a path that is not energy independent. As a matter of fact, it was a managed decline over the last 15 years to a position where it was energy dependent, actually. So while the United States has been working towards its own energy independence from everyone, and they have achieved that. Actually, if I remember correctly, in the first few years of Biden's administration, the United States has achieved full energy independence and is becoming the net exporter of energy. And that took them 10, 15 years to achieve. In that same period, Europe has actively managed its deindustrialization and de-energizing locally, right? And as a matter of fact, put itself to rely on cheap supply of Russian LNG. So the question is, that could work, I think, if there was a dramatic push towards energy independence of Europe that can fuel its closed loop economy. I'm not seeing that happening, actually. What I'm seeing is a push towards militarization as opposed to push towards reindustrialization of non-military industries. By the way, both of those will actually need energy. So I think energy is going to be, that's going to be win or lose here. Will Europe solve its energy question or not?
Yeah, but I also think that people don't realize how expensive that society would be, right? I mean, there's a reason that Temu is the most popular and downloaded app in all of Europe, right? People are quite used to things being cheaper. And also we forget, a lot of European products are produced in China. So if they were to take all of that production home, that would be mean products and inflation at a whole nother level than what we've seen. But I think some people would kind of wish for that and say, I prefer that because this idea of me losing my my current job and being automated and needing to pivot into being a combination of an investor and an entrepreneur. I mean, I think a lot of people say that's just too much. I hate investing. I don't like saving. It's not gonna happen. And going out there, making myself available, for peanuts, I will not. I'm not able to do that as well. So I think for a number of people, and I don't know if that is 50% or thereabouts, but it's a lot of people, right?
I think it's a majority, actually.
Yes.
I think it is that's a normal, regular mindset. That's how we were conditioned to live. And I think you're right that that this is going to be potentially a rude awakening for many.
But I guess this is also why it's important to start talking about it, but maybe also why the politicians need to get out of their shell and actually address this. Yeah. Because I think we'll see this phase of rejection where people will then lose their job, and let's say half of those people who lose their job, they will pivot and get another one, maybe some for more money, some for slightly less money. And then you'll have this group who, especially in Europe, will say, well, I don't want to be flexible. I will get back into something that fits me well at a good salary. And then they'll wait, and maybe they'll spend some of their money if they've saved a little bit, and then they might live on government welfare. But then at some point, the model will not be sustainable anymore.
Yeah, it's not sustainable, correct. I think, and so to me, I completely understand what you're describing, but that model depends on on value generation and production, right? That requires that model to be funded. So the money has to come from somewhere, right? So to me, that might be a short-term band-aid, but I believe that we are on an irreversible and inevitable path to a state where most human work is no longer going to be economically viable for organizations, right? And that is just masking the reality that we are facing, and that those who are choosing to ignore this will be finding themselves in a very, very challenging situation a year from now. Many actually are facing this situation today. More will be facing it tomorrow. Some a year from now, many 3 years from now, probably most 5 years from now, and everybody in 10 years.
So if you look around at your colleagues and friends and so on, how many would you say think you are slightly crazy when you bring up all of this? How many would say, okay, it makes sense, but I'll ignore it? And how many do you see actually actively wanting to do something about it?
And so I would say that the split there is probably 60-20-20. I would say I think that 60% of the population is oblivious as to what's coming. And majority of them are placing their bet that this is yet another creative destruction, industrial revolution version, right? So 60% of the people, I think, are not aware of the magnitude and shortening timeline where this is going to actually hit them. I'd say 20% are curiously interested, but hedging their bets, as in, this is not going to impact me because I am special, because I have deep expertise, because I have networks of people. So I think 20% of people are waking up to the reality, but are hedging their bets that who they are and what they're doing is going to be sufficient to protect them. And I believe that there's probably 20% of people at the moment who are actually taking action, who are taking action. I've taken action. You are taking action. About 20%. How fast is this disruption coming? As I said, we are already in it. We are already in it. The train has left the station, and we are all on this train. And I think that we are looking at, in the next probably 5 years, I can see the unemployment numbers going up. I believe that 10 years from now, if there is no intervention, and by the way, we're just projecting, like from this point, playing the movie forward, assuming no major disruption or major interventions occur. But I think if we just play the movie forward as is, artificial intelligence systems that we now have are the worst they will ever be. Yeah. And the progress that has happened only in the last year is dramatic. I've been in technology industry for more than 30 years. So I've been having the front seat looking at how technology is developed, deployed, and impact it makes to organizations and ultimately society. I remember 20 years ago, technological breakthroughs were occurring, at one or two per year. And then in the last decade, those breakthroughs have, started occurring every month. And then the last couple of years, we've seen those breakthroughs occur almost on a weekly basis. And today, these breakthroughs are occurring every other day. Every other day, there is a breakthrough that is technology-driven breakthrough. And these breakthroughs are not just happening in the field of AI. These breakthroughs are happening in the fields of robotics and biotech and space tech and chemistry and physics and math. So information technology, I view it as the grandmother of all these daughter and granddaughter technologies, and all of them are going through an exponential improvement. So, there was a famous video of, two black holes circulating around each other, and then you can see this has been happening for maybe millions of years, and then it goes zip, and they merge in a millisecond. So to me, we are on this exponential path to a completely different set of different universe in which we will live. And I don't think that people intuitively have ability to understand the speed at which this is happening, right? At speed. So therefore, if we just just play this movie forward, look at the advancements that happened in the last year alone, understand that we are on the exponential curve of progress, not just in information technology, which is manifesting itself as AI to us, but that exponential curve of progress is happening on hardware front and in all other flavors of technologies, biotech, space tech, and others, that I can absolutely see a scenario that very soon we will cross the event horizon, if we haven't already, of technology intelligence, silicon intelligence that supersedes biological intelligence. And once that has happened, the basic proposition that human worker has no longer holds true. And it's simply the Adam Smith invisible hand is going to work its magic to a point where we're going to end up in a state of abundance, as I describe it, but the consequence is going to be there will be no work for people anymore in a traditional sense. So
yes,
so
I think that
sorry,
people.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think people will be shocked at agentic AI. I think we've just seen an element of it with Meta introducing the new Meta ad system, where you basically just say what you want to achieve, and then you apply the budget, and then Meta makes the ad for Facebook and Instagram and so forth. So that if that works better than traditional advertising, with having an advertising agency creating an ad for you and planning it, well, then essentially you killed an industry, right?
You
And
killed an industry.
then you might say, okay, maybe it doesn't work better. Maybe it works better if your budget is small. So, I mean, let's say for a very big client, using 10% on the agency might make sense. But if you are small and you need to pay them 30-40%, it makes a lot more sense just giving it to Meta.
And one
But
more
that
thing,
bar
one
will
more
just
factor,
move.
I'm going to say one more factor, Daniel, that I think is important for people to realize is that the AI systems, they don't have to be superhuman. They just have to be better than human. They don't have. They will be superhuman, but they only have to be better, faster, a little bit better, a little bit faster, a little bit safer, a little bit more intelligent, meaning faster in problem solving, and that's it, right? That's it. Now, some companies are going to be protective of their employees. I am sure. Governments will be incentivizing them. I'm sure. But ultimately, the competitive forces are competitive forces. We no longer have horses as the means of transport. It's inevitable. You just have to play the movie forward. But just logically play the movie forward and see where you arrive, right?
Yeah, look at autonomous cars, right? Once you really see the numbers, and once it is proven that they're safer, a lot safer, and once you prove that not owning your own car, but simply just hailing a robo-taxi will save you a lot of money, and you will get the car you need, right? So if you're one person, you will get the small one. If you're a whole family, you'll get like a bigger version.
I'll give so on that front. Can I just address this? This is a very important part because I believe that this level of autonomy and automation will actually play a part in in that portfolio of income that people need to consider. Both autonomous vehicles and autonomous humanoid robots. So with Robo-Taxi that Tesla has just opened up in Texas, your depreciating asset, which is your car, has a potential to become a revenue generating asset. Yeah. So, and I've looked actually at the math for this. And the math is that, by the way, people can go and look on YouTube and find analysts who provide detailed economic analysis of what I'm going to say. But net of it all is that in the United States, for example, in North America, if you own a Tesla vehicle with full automation that you can, with a touch of a button, add to a robo-taxi fleet for the day, the calculations are that net income generated like that from your vehicle could be $40,000 to $60,000 a year. So just think of that for a second. From an investment that you make in buying a car, and Tesla vehicles in the United States, let's say from $40,000 to $60,000 cost, which is a depreciating asset, which costs you money, and then you end up throwing it out, replacing it or whatever in 5, 6, 7 years. Now this becomes a revenue generating asset. That changes fundamentally the perspective, right? If you put that vehicle on lease with zero down, it can pay for itself right out of the gate, and in year 2 start generating revenue for you for the remaining 4 or 5 years of its utilization. Or maybe if it's a robo-taxi, if it's maybe 3 years, but doesn't matter. You have changed fundamentally the model of what it means to own a vehicle and what it means, and you've added a source of revenue for your home. Let's play that for the humanoid robots. We see dramatic development in that as well, dramatic development. And if we believe what Elon Musk is suggesting will be the retail price of humanoid robots, of Optimus that he is building, the estimates are $20,000 to $30,000 will be the cost of a humanoid robot. Now imagine humanoid robot is the right form factor for us. So humanoid robot fits into our world. This is really important to make a mention. Those humanoid robots will have dexterity that is more dexterous than us, threading a needle, and they will have autonomy and super intelligence in it for $30,000. So imagine this: if you lease that humanoid robot for $30,000, with zero down, it adds up to about, I don't know, $450 a month. $450 a month with zero down to have access to a polymath genius in your home who is going to be capable to do everything that you need done in that home. How much is it worth for families to have a genius polymath in their home who is not only going to do cleaning and cooking and laundry and folding the laundry and package the garbage out, but will ultimately be able to do the plumbing and do the everything physical that you need, and at the same time that is your personal doctor and lawyer and accountant? Is that worth an average of $15 a day? Furthermore, could that robot or few of them become your passive income fleet? Could they be doing the work on your behalf, right? So when you ask me, what are those different alternative sources of income, I forgot to mention this. You just triggered my memory, but that has to be part of the new economy model, right? This is why I think it is superbly important. A part of the answer to our problem is actually scaling this up as fast as we can, so that we can bridge this time of transition, which is going to be painful for many, to get to that stage, right, where we actually achieve that stage of abundance.
So it could be that the truly wealthy, they actually, instead of having a stock portfolio and let's say 10 rental properties, instead they would have 25 humanoid robots and 10 robo-taxis.
But potentially. Now, of course, eventually everybody figures this out, so there is normalization eventually. Yeah. But yes, I absolutely agree. I believe there was going to be a period where, quote unquote, normal people, not super wealthy, quote unquote, normal people, will be able to supplement their income by making these kinds of investments. And that for these kinds of investments, you actually don't need a lot of capital, because these investments will be able to immediately pay for themselves and add to your source of income, right?
So have you looked into actually buying Robo-Taxi, being one of the first movers?
Absolutely. As soon as automatic driving is allowed in Canada, I'm a Canadian. I guess you can see this by the flags I proudly wear behind me. So as soon as fully autonomous driving and robo-taxi concept is available in Canada, I will be the first one to buy one or two if I can.
But couldn't you just basically invest in 2 robo-taxis in the US, let's say in Texas, if they now are legal to drive there?
I guess you can. I think that what Tesla is doing is they're going to be running robo-taxi business with their own vehicles. So this will be a revenue source for them, and they will allow people who own Tesla vehicles to add them to the fleet. So yes, I mean, technically I could now buy a Tesla. I could technically buy a Tesla in the United States as long as I can arrange its safe storage and recharging remotely. I guess that's a possibility. Yes, it's actually a very good idea. I'm going to look into that.
Yeah, because I mean, very quickly, just like with Airbnb, right? There would be companies offering parking, storage, so to speak, of the vehicles, right? So people can invest into it.
Yeah. So what will be needed? You're right. Storage, washing, and charging. Right. Here is a new business. Here is a new business for somebody. Yeah. Organize, become the service station for, driverless vehicles, where they can come to rest and recharge and be washed and be ready for their next cycle. Right. Absolutely. So this will be an example of a newly emerged, for example, job and industry. The problem is that there won't be enough of those to supplement everybody else who will be losing their job, right? But you see, the opportunities are there. The opportunities are there, and people just need to start thinking about all of those and combine them to supplement the income that they will be losing from losing full-time employment, which as we already established, I believe is a certainty.
Okay, so let's try to sum up on this. So I guess what we're saying, staying flexible will be super important.
Having a short-term, mid-term, and long-term strategy, I think, is really going to be important. People need to be first and foremost aware of what's happening and why it is happening, and walk and live through their own 12 steps of grief to arrive to the acceptance that we are on this train, the train has left the station, and we are actually approaching a junction, which we spoke about in our previous session. Do we go left, do we go right? But people need to go through the 12 steps of grief to the point of acceptance that this is what it is. This is reality that we're now facing. And then short-term strategy is lean in to understand the promise of technology and try to position yourself to learn and increase your unique value proposition for your current employer. Mid-term strategy has to be, we need to find the ways to supplement that stable income with multiple other sources of income. Those sources will likely be a reduced version of your wages. And maybe there is an arrangement that can be made with people who maybe people will say, look, I understand that there is no more full-time job available, but I still can contribute. Can we have a part-time job available to 2 days a week, right? People will need to be thinking of that, plus supplementing that with perhaps other types of wage arbitrage income, perhaps following their passions, interests, and hobbies, supplemented by actions that increase their property rights. So can you invest in a rental property, perhaps instead of going for that next trip? Can you repoint your money to some investment that can start generating residual income, plus passive income opportunities like we described, Tesla's automated driving or humanoid robots as your passive income? There are other passive income ideas that are known and available. Like having a vending machine business is an excellent example of a very passive and good income. So those types of things I think are going to be happening more and more. And then all of that I think will need to sit on top of some form of universal income, maybe universal income plus national sovereign wealth fund dividend to compensate for your total income. And then the hope is that the actual sum amount of money that you need to preserve your lifestyle, some total amount of money, will actually go down because of the technology driving depreciation, right? So the cost of goods and services drops as a positive force to help with this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to keep in mind that the end state is a much richer world.
Yes.
With a lot more time and a lot more freedom, right? And some people will be caught in the middle. I think the biggest mistake you can make is expect governments to be ahead of the game. I think it needs to be people who are ahead of the game, not the governments.
And this is exactly what we are doing now. And I think that there is an emerging momentum that is coming through social media conversations that are going to become louder and more visible and will ultimately compel our elected officials to come to us in honesty and tell us the truth of what we are facing. And at that point, we will be then able to mobilize and point our energy towards, towards solving this issue. Yeah.
Exactly. I think let's end it on that note. I hope it inspires some people. Thank you very much, Dalibor.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Daniel.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.